They raised their glasses to the future of the Mercer name. But the name they toasted wasn't mine. Laughter echoed across the table as my father clinked crystal with his sons, calling them his legacy. I sat 10 seats away, invisible in a room I helped build. No eye contact, no mention. Just the wine passing by me, like I wasn't even there. I didn't interrupt, didn't speak. I just folded my napkin and memorized the moment. Because that night, I didn't come to ask for a seat at the table. I came to take the whole damn table back. They thought my silence meant weakness. What they forgot is that the quiet one often holds the final signature. To my legacy, Dad said, lifting his glass. Cameron, Tyler, my sons, the ones carrying the Mercer name forward. The crystal caught the candlelight as he raised it high, eyes warm, proud, focused. On them, not me. A soft clink of glasses followed. Chairs shifted. Laughter rolled across the table like a wave I wasn't part of. I sat at the far end, hands folded, smile practiced, heart steel-wrapped. He never said my name, not even in passing. Cameron smirked, leaned in toward Tyler, whispered something. They both laughed, sharp and careless, like boys who'd never had to earn applause. I adjusted the napkin in my lap, kept my chin up. The private dining room of the Ravenwood Country Club was dressed in perfection. Bone-white linen, flickering chandeliers, champagne sweating in gold buckets. Outside the tall windows, my black Audi R8 idled in the spotlight of the circular driveway. It looked like a shadow that had learned how to gleam. Inside, I was just another seat filled, another plate passed. Margot reached to refill my glass. Pinot, not my usual, and smiled, brittle. You good, sweetheart? I nodded once. That's all it took to disappear again. I mean, Cam just closed a $2 million quarter, Dad continued, gripping Cameron's shoulder like it had carried the family. And Ty's team, state semifinals, baby. That's grit, that's blood, that's a Mercer. More clinks, more laughter. Forks scraped plates. I chewed slowly, tasted nothing. Margot tried to pivot, and Sloane is doing her little project thing. Dad cut in. A flick of the hand, a passing breeze. He didn't look at me when he said it. I looked at him. My hand slipped under the table, rested on the smooth leather of my clutch. Inside, a matte black folder, thick paper, embossed seal, transfer of ownership, full reversal, signed, sealed. I'd had it prepared 2 weeks ago, quietly, legally, permanently. Gerald Mercer still thought the world was his dinner table, that all he had to do was raise a glass and everything beneath it bowed, that the silence around him was deference, not distance. He didn't notice my name wasn't on the wine list. He didn't notice the credit card bill had his wrong billing address. He didn't notice that I hadn't spoken in 45 minutes. He never noticed me. Not really, but he will. Cameron stood, cleared his throat. Let's get a real toast going, he said, lifting his flute. To Dad, the lion of the family. Tyler whooped. Gerald beamed. The waiter poured more champagne. I didn't raise my glass. Instead, I watched the flame of the nearest candle tremble, the scent of roasted garlic and lavender wax thick in the air, the glint of the Audi through the window reflecting off the chandelier like a mirror cutting light in half. I glanced down the table. 40 feet of white linen, crystal, gold, legacy, and at the very end of it, me. I smiled, not wide, not warm, just enough, because I'd already decided. Tonight, the lion remembers the girl he left outside the pride, and I'm not here to roar. I'm here to take back the fire. What's the point, Sloane? You'll quit halfway like you always do. He said it with a shrug, flipping the TV remote without even glancing at me. I was 17. All I'd asked for was a new sketchbook. I stood there holding the old one. Bent, stained, the cover half torn, and something shifted.
Not loudly, not in rage, but in that quiet way a bone hardens after too many fractures. That was the last time I asked him for anything. Dad called Cameron visionary when he scribbled a marketing funnel on a napkin. He told me my flowcharts looked like laundry lists. He gave Tyler a MacBook for Christmas, said it was for leadership potential. I got a sweater, size large, still had the tag on it when I gave it to Goodwill. But I wasn't jealous. I was calculating. I scanned every rejection like data. Every laugh, every scoff, every shrug. An equation I couldn't solve until I flipped the variables. Validation in this family didn't come with achievement, it came with noise. And I didn't do noise, so I chose something else. Stealth. I waited tables, learned Python, watched startup pitch decks like they were war plans. I'd come home smelling like fryer grease, eat cold cereal by desk light, sketch models in silence. I didn't ask for rides, didn't join group chats, didn't post wins online. Instead, I applied for a business registration using my middle name, Elaine, and my grandmother's maiden name, Merrick. Merrick Digital Ventures, LLC. Clean, professional, unrecognizable. No one connected it to the quiet girl sketching in the corner. No one thought to check. Especially not him. I built quietly. Launched a basic prototype. Failed. Rebuilt. Launched again. 2 users, then 20. Then a niche investor who messaged me. Who built this? They think in layers. I smiled at that one. That night, I pulled out the old sketchbook. The same one he'd said was pointless. I scanned the first 3 pages into a PDF and saved it in a folder labeled Proof. Someday I knew I'd use it. I never told my family I moved out. Just left a forwarding address at the post office and rented a 1-bedroom above a bookstore. It smelled like dust and cinnamon and freedom. I picked out a black desk, no drawers. Transparency was my favorite power, and I started drafting something bigger. Not a product, a position. I didn't just want my own thing. I wanted ownership of the very space he said I didn't belong in, and I knew exactly where to start. Dad's firm, Andeltech, was sloppy, outdated processes, leaky divisions, too many middle managers and not enough vision. They were ripe for disruption. They just didn't know it yet. But I did. So I filed the first set of incorporation papers on my 26th birthday, lit a candle, ate boxed cake, smiled as I clicked submit, and just before midnight, I took a Sharpie and wrote 1 word across the old sketchbook cover. Watch. Because the girl he couldn't see was about to own the blueprint he never understood. Can you spell that again? The paralegal asked, eyes flicking between my ID and the signature line. I didn't blink. Elaine Merrick, 2 R's, 2 signatures, 1 holding company. The papers lay flat between us. Crisp, creamstock, embossed seal in the corner. Unassuming. Dangerous. A corporate acquisition never screams. It doesn't need to. It signs quietly, clears funds silently, and changes destinies with the weight of a pen. I slid the Mont Blanc across the table, capped it after the last stroke. 2 witnesses. 1 notary. 1 irrevocable transfer of partial ownership. The room smelled like ink and control. Nobody in that glass-walled office knew Gerald Mercer had once called me dead weight in heels. Nobody knew Merrick Digital had a birth date that matched mine. Nobody asked why I wore no jewelry, why I used a P.O. box, why I paid in full. I kept my voice low, my posture straighter than the contracts, my ID tucked behind a tinted wallet. Everything about me said don't notice. And it worked. Andeltech had issued its quarterly shares 2 weeks prior. Enough soft hands had cashed out. Enough lazy eyes had skimmed the board reports. All I had to do was gather, quietly. Every clause I approved, every loophole I buried, every future decision now passed through a proxy that answered to me. I chose a compliance firm out of Denver. An attorney named Carla who specialized in blind trusts and clean slates. She didn't ask questions, just ran numbers. Her email read, effective April 7th, voting rights secured. Visibility delay, 90 days. That gave me exactly 3 months. I added it to the whiteboard in my apartment, next to a calendar marked in red ink. April 7th control. May 21st. Father's Day. June 6th asset flip deadline. I drew arrows between them. Tight, strategic, permanent. That same night, I changed the passcode to my home Wi-Fi. New name, Lion's End. New password, not yours, 197. I didn't smile when I typed it. Not then. Instead, I opened a drawer and pulled out the black sketchbook. Taped a sticky note to the inside flap. Watch what happens when the blueprint signs back. I'd spent years chasing permission. Now I was printing consequences. At the next investor call, Gerald Mercer would speak proudly of strong momentum and legacy leadership. He'd say the firm was evolving. He'd use words like growth and innovation. He wouldn't know half the room belonged to me. That his desk lamp, his keycard, his quarterly bonus already sat under a new roof, and the signature that made it possible, he'd never seen it. Because when the contract finally lands on his desk, the name on it won't be Mercer. It'll be mine.
Badge isn't working.
Dad muttered, tapping it harder. Probably a reader glitch. The security guard smiled politely, reached for the scanner. Red. Again. The light blinked, slow and final. Access denied. He stepped back, confused, patted his pocket like maybe another ID would appear. But there was only one. And it no longer worked. Inside, the Andel Tech lobby buzzed like usual. Suits gliding over marble, elevators chiming open, coffee orders echoing near the atrium. But Gerald Mercer stood outside the turnstile, holding a useless badge and a history that had just expired. They told him to wait. It was escalating the issue. He smiled, tight-lipped. No problem. But I knew that smile. It was the same one he wore when I got rejected from Princeton, and he said, should have had a backup. This wasn't a glitch. It was the first brick falling. A week before, I'd flagged his credentials through internal systems. Carla executed the command. Delay removal from external access log for 7 days. No alerts. On paper, he still had admin rights. In practice, he couldn't open his own inbox. And no one noticed. That's the thing about powerful men. They don't watch the floorboards until one gives out. That afternoon, he called it twice, left a voicemail for Gary in systems like it was a minor inconvenience. Said the phrase, "We'll get this fixed by morning," 3 times. I wrote it on my whiteboard next to the date, May 17th. Badge fails. I'd chosen that day on purpose. The last board meeting before Q2, he was supposed to present forecasts. Instead, he stood in the hallway, checking his phone, pretending he wasn't locked out of the room he once commanded. Someone walked by, mid-level analyst, young guy in rolled-up sleeves. He nodded at Dad, swiped in without breaking stride. Green light. Door opened. Dad didn't flinch, but his eyes followed, like maybe the door would apologize and let him in anyway. It didn't. Meanwhile, my inbox pinged. Subject, approval of system override protocols. Body, confirmed. Elaine Merrick, clearance validated. Mercer access, restricted pending secondary review. I sipped my coffee, glanced at the digital dashboard. His file now sat under legacy permissions. View only. No edits, no deletions, no control. Across the city, he was still pacing the lobby. Tyler had texted him about tea time. Cameron had messaged, "Don't forget to mention the AI module. Sounds impressive." He couldn't reply. His screen wouldn't load. His login expired. The system didn't kick him out. It simply stopped letting him in. No alarms, no flash, just a closed circuit. That night, he called Margot. I wasn't on speaker, but I didn't need to be. She whispered my name once. low and careful, like it had become radioactive. He didn't say it back, but I could hear it, in his silence, in his breath, in the sudden pause before he hung up, because the lion never roars when he realizes the cage door was locked from the outside. "Sir, I'm sorry. Your card's been declined." The waiter said it softly, like an apology wrapped in velvet. But the silence that followed hit like glass shattering in a cathedral. Gerald blinked, looked down at the black Amex in his hand, the same one he used for golf retreats, donor dinners, and legacy wine auctions, the one he used to pay for Cameron's emergency Vegas trip, the one he once slapped onto my college counselor's desk and said, "Not for her." He handed it back with a slight chuckle. "Run it again," he said, already reaching for his phone. The waiter nodded, disappeared. Cameron raised an eyebrow, swirled his scotch. "System glitch?" Tyler kept scrolling, half listening. Margot stared at her water glass like it might rescue her. I didn't say a word, just kept cutting my steak, slow and even, like the edges mattered. 10 minutes earlier, Dad had been basking in center light, telling the waiter to bring another round before dessert, bragging about upcoming mergers he wouldn't finish, leaning back like nothing in the world could shift beneath him. But the shift had already happened. He just hadn't looked down yet. The waiter returned, face neutral, eyes flicking toward me for a beat too long. "Still declined, sir," he said, gently placing the card on the table. No one touched it. Gerald cleared his throat. "Try this one," he said, offering a silver visa. His voice clipped, no eye contact. Tyler glanced up. "Everything okay?" No answer. Cameron leaned over. "Wait, is that the company card?" Dad didn't respond. The silver one worked. The waiter thanked him, took the new card, disappeared like smoke. Margot forced a smile. "Must be a billing address issue." No one corrected her. I reached for my wine, the stem cool against my fingertips. My reflection swam in the glass, sharp and still. This was the part most people missed. It's not always the explosion that breaks them. Sometimes it's the fizzle, the embarrassing click that says, "You're not in control anymore." 3 days earlier, I'd instructed Carla to freeze all executive access points tied to Gerald's name. No alerts, no flags, just permission. Revoked. The card he used tonight linked directly to the General Expense Fund, which was now under my signature. The internal note read, "Card status, deactivated, owner unaware, no access escalation allowed without board approval." I signed it at 2:14 a.m., lit a candle afterward. Didn't make a wish, didn't need to. The table stayed quiet through dessert. Tyler checked his phone. Cameron asked if there was another bottle in back. Gerald stared at the check, no appetite left. He never looked at me, but I didn't need him to. His hand trembled just enough. The lion hadn't fallen, not yet, but his claws had just slipped on polished marble. "And then there's Sloane," Dad said, raising his glass with a smirk. Still pretending to be the black sheep. Cameron barked out a laugh. Tyler choked on his drink. Even Margot smiled, tight, polite, the way women do when they've survived this man too long. I didn't move, didn't flinch. I just watched. The room fell back into laughter, chairs scraping, ice clinking, voices louder than they needed to be. I kept my eyes on the flame in the center of the table, flickering, unbothered, patient. He hadn't said my name once the entire evening. Now that he did, it was the punchline. I let the joke land, let the sting settle, let their amusement stretch long enough for the silence after to feel awkward. That's when power shifts. Not in the explosion, but the pause. Dad tipped his glass too hard into Cameron's. It cracked at the rim. Tiny fracture. No one noticed but me. He set it down too fast, wiping his hand. Anyway, he said, you boys are building something real, not like these little pet projects floating around. I leaned back slowly, napkin folded in my lap, untouched plate in front of me. They kept talking about Tyler's sports fund, Cameron's app launch, the new cabin Gerald bought for legacy vacations. No one asked about my work. No one had to. That wasn't the point. They weren't mocking my failure. They were mocking the idea that I wasn't one. I looked down the table, polished oak, perfect cutlery, 10 chairs, and realized I wasn't angry. I was done. Cameron reached across the table, holding up his glass. To the real future of the Mercer name, he said, nodding to Dad. To the builders. They toasted. Gerald grinned. The cracked glass caught the chandelier light like a blade. And me? I stood up. Not fast, not dramatic, just enough. The chair shifted back, quiet against the floor, the air shifting with it. I actually brought something, I said, my voice smooth as silver. Dad glanced over, already dismissing me. Later, sweetheart. We're mid-toast. I didn't sit back down. Cameron frowned. Everything okay? Tyler raised an eyebrow. Margot froze. I slid my clutch from under the table, opened it, pulled out a black folder. No Brandon, no monogram. Just wait. The room went still. Even the waiter in the corner stopped pouring. Consider this my toast, I said, placing the folder directly in front of my father. He looked down at it like it might bite. What is this? He asked. An update, I said. And a correction. No one laughed. He didn't open it yet. He stared at the spine, the matty finish, the clean folds. He always did like presentation, and while he debated whether to laugh or read, I smiled. Because either way, the joke was over. You should open it, Dad. Before dessert. His hand hovered above the folder like it might burn. The table had gone still. Voices swallowed. Forks paused mid-air. Air thick with the kind of silence people mistake for peace. Gerald Mercer had always been the one with answers. Now he looked like he couldn't even read. The matte black folder sat neatly in front of him, unassuming. But it had weight. It had teeth. I don't have time for games, Sloane, he muttered, forcing a laugh that didn't land. This isn't a game, I said, voice even. It's paperwork. You love paperwork. He peeled it open with 2 fingers, like maybe the pages inside would flinch. They didn't, but his face did. His eyes scanned the first page. Then again. Then slower. Cameron leaned over. What is it? Tyler frowned. Wait, is that a contract? I waited. The candlelight flickered across his cheek. His jaw tightened. His fingers twitched. Margot was already pale, her hand clenched around her napkin. You're joking, he said, but his voice cracked halfway. He flipped to the second page, saw the signatures, saw the name, Elaine Merrick. The pen slipped from his hand, rolled across the table, and dropped with a sharp click against the tile. No one picked it up. I don't understand, he said. But he did. The color was draining too fast for anything else. You do, I said gently. You just didn't know it was me. I stepped back, let the silence settle in, let every heartbeat at that table sink to mine. I acquired Andeltech through a private holding firm 2 months ago, I continued. I now hold full controlling interest, executive rights, and voting power. You're listed as a transition consultant for 6 months, or until the board decides otherwise. He didn't blink, didn't breathe. Cameron stood. That's not possible! Tyler shook his head. She's bluffing, right? This is a stunt. I looked at them. then back at my father. "I never needed a seat at the table," I said. "I built the table. You just didn't check whose name was engraved underneath." Margot opened her mouth, then closed it again. I reached into my clutch one last time, took out a set of keys, matte black, Audi R8. I placed them next to the folder. "That's the company car, technically," I said, tilting my head. "It belongs to the CEO." No one moved. The waiter stood in the corner, half frozen, pretending not to listen. The champagne glass with the fracture line sat untouched. "I came here out of courtesy," I said, voice soft, "to deliver this in person. I thought you deserved that." Gerald finally spoke. "You think this makes you better than us?" I smiled. "No, it just makes me undeniable." And as I turned to leave, the only sound was paper, not applause, being folded under his shaking hand. "She's lying. This can't be real." Tyler's voice broke first, thin and too loud for a room that had gone quiet as a church basement. No one answered him. The black folder still sat open. The legal print reflected silver under the chandelier. The cracked champagne glass hadn't moved. I stood a few feet back from the table, arms loose at my sides, not defensive, not triumphant, just finished. Dad's face had frozen somewhere between denial and collapse. The way people look when the ground doesn't shake, it just vanishes. Cameron was blinking fast, mouth slightly open. He looked like he was about to argue, but even he knew the facts were inked. Margot hadn't spoken since I laid the keys down. She just kept tracing the rim of her water glass with one finger, like the shape of silence might explain something. The air was heavy, not dramatic. Just over. I didn't need applause. I didn't need them to rise or rage. I just needed them to see, and they did. "This is insane," Cameron muttered, flipping through the pages again, hands clumsy now. "There's no way Dad would have—" "That's the point," I cut in, voice soft. He didn't see the name. He didn't trace the moves. He didn't bother to ask where I'd gone when I moved out. Didn't notice my name missing from the company's HR roster because it was never there to begin with. "Elaine Merrick," Margot said suddenly. Her eyes met mine. Sharp, glassy. "You used Grandma's name." I nodded. She would have understood. Dad tried to speak. No sound came. He just shook his head once, like maybe if he denied the moment long enough, it would undo itself. But it didn't. The room was holding its breath, waiting for a next move that wouldn't come. Not from me. I'd said what needed saying. Not loud, not cruel, just true. Cameron pushed his chair back fast. It scraped the floor, sharp and messy. Tyler stood too, arms crossed, like posture could fix dignity. I didn't care, not anymore. "You're not going to stay?" Margot asked, too quiet. "No," I said, sliding my clutch under my arm. "I already did." The lights above flickered as I turned toward the door. Not enough to go dark, just enough to remind the room who was leaving. Outside, my car waited in the circle drive. Black, low, deliberate. I didn't rush, didn't look back. The heels of my boots tapped softly against the stone floor. 12 steps to the door. One lifetime from where I started. The last thing I saw before it shut behind me was the folder still open and the glass still cracked. And inside that perfect room, for the first time in their lives, none of them knew what to say. The email came in at 6:42. AM subject. Formal resignation. Gerald Mercer. I didn't click it right away. I just stared at the subject line, let the weight of those 4 words settle across the quiet of my apartment. Rain tapped at the windows, slow and steady. The kind of rain that doesn't ask permission, the kind that clears things. I leaned back in my chair, coffee cooling beside me, laptop screen glowing in the dim gray light. It was done. Not the revenge, that had landed last night. Not the silence that had already spoken louder than applause. This was something else. Transfer. Gerald Mercer had surrendered his seat, his signature, his grip on a company he once ruled like a family heirloom. There was no ceremony, just a document, time-stamped, final. I opened it. No message, no excuses, just a digital signature, still bold, still arrogant, and beneath it, mine. Sloan E. Mercer. No middle name hidden this time. No aliases, no initials meant to soften the blow. Welcome, CEO. The plaque had arrived before dawn, hand-delivered by a courier who didn't recognize my face. He asked if I was Mr. Mercer's assistant. I told him no, not anymore. The gold plate sat on my desk now, still wrapped in protective plastic. I peeled it back slowly, revealing the engraving beneath. Clean font, full name, no commas. It was perfect. I thought I'd cry, but I didn't. Not out of pride, not even relief, just stillness. Because the war was never just about power. It was about visibility. It was about standing in the room and not being mistaken for furniture. And now? Every door I open has to pass through my name first. The ripple started fast. Cameron's assistant emailed, asking if the leadership lunch was still happening. I replied, "Please remove me from CC. I'll handle my calendar directly." Tyler's PR team reached out, offering to collaborate on the rebrand. I archived the message. Margot hadn't called. She wouldn't. But I knew her silence meant she finally understood the difference between grace and disappearance. My favorite moment, though, came at 9:07 a.m. A group email hit the leadership inbox. Subject, transition notice. Body, effective immediately. All asset requests, sign-offs, and decisions must go through Sloan Mercer. Please update documentation accordingly. There was a pause, then a follow-up. Please note, Ms. Mercer has final say on all staffing decisions. I stared at that line. Final say. The girl who once needed permission to print a flyer now decided who stayed on payroll. I stood, crossed the room, and taped the plaque to the inside of my front door. Not because I needed to see it, because I wanted to remember how quiet power feels when no one can take it from you. The rain kept falling. The world kept moving. But for once, I wasn't chasing anything. And tomorrow, when I walk into that office, the desk won't just be mine. It'll finally know my name. We cleared everything from the office, the assistant said, handing me the key. Didn't think you'd want his things. She was right. I didn't. The key was cold in my hand, small, weightless, but the lock it opened was generational. I stepped in. Same walls, same view, different name on the glass. Sloan Mercer, CEO etched clean, center-aligned, unapologetically, mine. The light poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, catching on chrome fixtures and the edge of a leather chair he used to call the throne. There were no family photos, no desk toys, no framed golf plaques, just air and space and silence, the kind of silence I'd once feared. Now it followed me like respect. I walked to the desk, placed my hand flat on its surface. He used to sit here and talk about legacy. He thought it meant who you praised loudest, who you paid for, who got your last name and your first vote. I thought it meant something else. I pulled the envelope from my bag, thicker than the folder, sealed in navy wax. Inside, a launch packet, the Mercer Mentorship Initiative, a fully funded female-led accelerator for underrepresented founders. Applicants under 30, no pedigree required. I signed the final page, then turned to the wall behind me. There, framed in matte black and museum glass, was the page from my old sketchbook, the one he called a waste of time. Lines, boxes, arrows. The first version of the interface I built. Still rough. Still mine. I hung it where his Man of the Year plaque once lived. It looked better already. There's no music when the system flips, no parade, no speech, Just new routines, new rules, new people who will never have to sit at the kids' table for having real ideas. Someone knocked. It was a junior engineer, maybe 22, eyes wide, laptop hugged to her chest. She smiled awkwardly. "Ms. Mercer, I just wanted to say, we're really glad it's you." I nodded. "Thank you, me too." She left. Door clicked shut. I turned back to the glass. The skyline blinked slowly under the morning sun, towers casting long shadows. My reflection stood between them. Still. Sharp. Unmissable. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. I didn't burn down the house. I rewired the foundation. I opened the door they kept locked. Then I walked through it and brought the blueprint with me. Because legacy isn't what they leave you. It's what you build when no one's clapping. And now, every time someone enters this office, they'll see the name and know she built it herself. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't to fight louder. It's to walk in quieter, with receipts. There's a particular kind of strength that grows in silence. The kind that doesn't beg to be seen, but reshapes everything once it is. When you've spent years being dismissed, talked over, underestimated, you start to understand the value of not just being heard, but being undeniable. That moment when you no longer need their approval, that's not bitterness. That's clarity. And it changes everything. We're taught to believe belonging comes from being accepted, but sometimes it comes from realizing you were never supposed to shrink to fit someone else's comfort. The truth is, you don't have to prove your worth to people committed to misunderstanding you. You just have to keep building, not out of spite, but from knowing that your voice, your ideas, your presence matter. Legacy isn't something you inherit. It's something you design, brick by brick, choice by choice, name by name. And the day you finally take up space without apology, you'll realize you weren't the quiet one. You were the architect the whole time. Thank you for spending time with this story. If any part of it echoed something you felt, being overlooked, building quietly, finding your voice when no one was listening, just know you're not alone. Stories like this aren't just about revenge. They're about reclaiming space, setting boundaries, and realizing you were powerful all along. If you've walked through something similar, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes sharing your truth helps someone else find theirs. And if this kind of storytelling speaks to you, the kind that honors quiet strength and hard-won clarity, feel free to like, subscribe, or share with someone who might need it. Until next time, take care of your voice. Even in silence, it matters more than they know.